Thank you so much, everybody who's here to watch Advocacy and Storytelling with Comics. My name is Joshua Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Green Mountain Support Services. And with me is the famed and award-winning cartoonist and storyteller, Marek Bennett. So Marek, thank you for coming here for us. Just a quick background for us is that what we do at Green Mountain Support Services, we've produced so far 2 anthologies, advocacy anthologies. One was about someone living with people living with cerebral palsy, and our latest one is Who We Are: The Day in the Life of a Direct Support Professional. And one of the things that we utilize with our connections with a lot of our cartoonists that live here around in Vermont, New England, is being able to utilize comic books for advocacy purposes. And we're connected with Marek Bennett. Has done a lot of work in New Hampshire. He's done a lot of advocacy and comics through many different platforms, and we're honored and excited to have Marek here to talk to all of you about how you can utilize comic books to tell your story, tell the story of the people that you work with that are living with disabilities. And it is a very accessible form of art. It's a very easily understood form of art in a way. We're all artists, and we wanted to first kind of have Marek. Did you want to kind of introduce yourself first and kind of give people a bit of your background, and then we'll go into how, some tips and some tricks and some ideas on how other direct support professionals could utilize comics as a form of advocacy.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I'm always excited to talk comics with you and see what you've been up to and share the stuff I'm working on. I just feel like we're in such a golden age for comics these days. Just the past 20 years or so have been really amazing as a rebirth of the art form, this ancient art form. So yeah, I've drawn comics all my life, ever since I could hold a pencil. Basically, I've drawn pictures, doodled little monsters and spaceships or whatever I was interested in, and it's making images has always been important to me, but also like the stories behind the images, what's happening, what's about to happen. So as a young kid, I would draw on my sketchbook and turn the page and draw the next thing and turn the page and draw the next thing. And I just thought of it as storytelling. Drawing was the same thing as storytelling. And I couldn't use words in my artwork. I couldn't read or write, but I knew that I wanted to tell stories that were maybe a little beyond my horizon, that I wasn't sure what was going to happen when I put them on the page and shared them with people. So that's always kind of drawn me on into pushing myself with this art form. The simplest form of comics is, comics is really just multiple images put in sequence, right? So the simplest form of comics is take a page, make a couple little boxes on it, and write a single word in each box that shows your mood over the course of the day, or draw a little smiley face or frowny face or anything like that. And if somebody else can look at that and get an idea sort of similar to your idea, then you've communicated in comics. So I see you're pulling up a sample comic that I drew. And this one, if we go back, if you go back a little bit, I'll show you what I mean by this. Now, as a cartoonist, I try to keep my work as simple as possible. So I use a lot of stick figures. I love stick figures because they're so economical. And people who look at a stick figure tend to say, oh, I could draw that because it's just like Bobby, this character here, who's based on a student I worked with at a rehabilitation center. Bobby's just a circle with 2 dots and a couple lines to show which way Bobby's looking, or whether Bobby's happy or sad, right? And by just changing some of those lines, I can quickly kind of give you a hint of what's going on emotionally in the character. And I also, to draw this, I just drew a couple boxes, and I said, well, I'll put Bobby down. Bobby is unable to use his hands and legs, unable to speak. And I had never really worked with a group of artists who could not pick up a pen or pencil before this residency, and some of whom could not also just say what they wanted to do in their story. So this was a real learning experience for me. And this comic was my way of going home after this residency and drawing some diary comics like this and saying, what did I just watch happen? There's this, I kind of observed, when I come into a classroom, I make a lot of comics in front of students, with suggestions from students. And I share the comics that I make, in my sketchbook or at my desk here. But then what we're really there to do is make comics alongside each other. So what Bobby's doing in that comic is he's creating comics sort of like some of this student artwork that you're showing there. Bobby and his assistant,
support professional.
Yeah, his support professional he has a technological device. He has an iPad that they're able to draw on the screen with it. And working together, they have a real rapport and a real communication. So working together, they're able to slowly, bit by bit, make the creative decisions that start to assemble a comic. And I just think all I did was I gave sort of the format of, we're going to draw one picture, very simple picture. And let's imagine we're going on a journey. The students decided the most interesting kind of story would be, everybody's going to draw a different journey that they're going to take. And where are you going to go with your journey in the comic? What's going to happen when you're there? What are you going to do? What are you going to see? And this was a longer format mini comic that I drew. There's a printable PDF somewhere on this post. It's a longer format mini comic, but it was my way of sort of showing that this is a longer format project, that it takes a little time, especially if your communications back and forth are like you're seeing in this part of the story. Like it takes a lot of back and forth for Bobby and his direct support professional to really pin down what Bobby wants. But they have a way of doing that pretty efficiently. Sort of, they have to guess categories and drill down to what Bobby wants. And then it also became, I find drawing comics like this, it encourages me to pay attention to what I'm interested in, to what I've observed. And if I start to feel tired of drawing the same stick figures over and over again, it means I need a different angle. In this case, I can zoom in on the hands. So when they start drawing together, like that was such a beautiful, intimate moment where really Bobby is participating in the story, directing the story, but really they can only draw it together when Bobby's hand and his support professional's hand, lifts up together and makes the mark on the screen. And that I wanted to really focus on, both bringing their faces into it, bringing their bodies into the equation, bringing their hands into the equation. I didn't try to put the artwork in there because to me, the artwork, sometimes it feels like it's almost secondary or a product of the creative work, which is creating, this is actually Bobby's artwork, creating the bus that Bobby decided was going to be the vehicle to take on this journey. And then just observing each other and using the boxes. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to use the boxes to show time, to show the digestion of that work, the contemplation of it, and then the reaction, which is the real payoff when you're working together on a project that is challenging and rewarding. To see that that's the other thing I personally love about comics. When you put the work into it, and students really put a lot of attention into creating this comic, they can see the results on the page in front of them, and they see the results on the faces of people who look at that artwork. So this is an example of I guess it's on a couple levels here. The value of the creative process of communicating together and working together to make sure everybody's included in creating this work of art, and that everybody gets to make decisions and work together towards the final story that we're getting down. But also for me, the value of going home after a day or a week of teaching and kind of examining my memory and saying, well, what did I just observe? What is important to me as a teacher, to me as an artist, working with my fellow artists? I didn't set out here to make an advocacy comic about, the Bobby or my students at this rehab center, but I guess in the end, it does turn out. You pointed out that it is an advocacy comic because it's presenting that creative experience. And I realized I could share it with people who were not in that classroom, who have never met Bobby, and respect Bobby's privacy also by, clearly this is not an identifiable cartoon of somebody or anybody. But it is a very personal story, and you're very up close to the characters' faces and seeing their reactions. So to me, comics, this is an example. This is one way to do comics, right? Every artist has a different way to use this concept of putting one image together with another. Every artist has a different way of using words and text and symbols in their comics. Another artist might have done a photorealistic drawing with more background and more setting information, and but this is my approach to it. Oh, here we're getting into Bobby's classmates' reactions, right? And because everybody's drawing comics together in this case, and creating stories together, everybody has a real vested interest in helping each other create this art, because they all see the payoff to it and they all want to contribute to the classroom culture. And to me, the real payoff is, we're getting to the end here. Take it to the big comics reading at the school library. We took Bobby's artwork down. We took every student's artwork down, assembled people. We brought classes in group by group into the auditorium, and we put that artwork up on the wall and we read through it and we applauded each other's artwork. And it was just such a rewarding experience to create artwork really together. It really underscored for me how dependent we all are on each other, whether you realize it or not, to create that artwork.
So Marek, people that could be watching this, they're watching it, could be a question like, hey, this is good, but I can only draw stick figures, or I there's nothing I can do about this. What are some of your tips and advice, or some of those teaching moments that you'd be able to provide for our direct support professionals watching this to say, are comics for them?
Yeah, I hear that. I draw a lot of stick figures because, like I said, I find people who see my stick figures tend to say, okay, I didn't realize I could draw that. I can draw, a blob with 2 dots. Or if you can pick up a pencil or use a tablet or work with somebody to create an image. I just encourage people to try it out. And if you feel like it doesn't look quite like somebody else's artwork, well, that's true. Nobody draws like anybody else unless you really, really study somebody's style and copy it. But that's one way to learn, but that's not for everybody. So I really believe that we create comics without any special training because, like you said, there's something inherently visual in a lot of our communication as people, even in our language. Even if we're not communicating visually, but we're using words, our language uses a lot of visual metaphor too. So yeah, if you're able to work together and look at the same artwork and collaborate on it, I encourage you to try it. It can be as simple as, actually, do you have the other residency post that I shared with you?
Yes.
I'll give you a couple examples of simple ways. This is like I say, this is a longer format diary comic that I went home and drew over several pages. So that's more to document the process. Working with my students, this was a separate residency, but we came up with a format. We had a lot of students who were adult and teen students who were nonverbal, or they just had a lot of special needs. And so we came up with, working with the art teacher who was hosting me, we came up with this way. We would just take really big paper, fold it in half. You see on the left side there, it says poster. We would fold the paper in half and then talk about a before after story, or a cause effect, or we started with before and after because it was a little easier to understand narrative in a chronological order. So what we started with was, we folded the poster and we drew on the top. We said, draw a scene where you'd like to do, or where you'd like to go. And just thinking as simply as possible, I work a lot with my fast storytelling tools: face, action, setting, and text. So I encourage them to put a face in there to show emotion of some sort. Although not all the students wanted to use faces. Some worked exclusively with faces and some never used faces. So these were just suggestions. I said, use a face if you want, use an action if you want, include some setting details, where and when is it. And if you want, include some text. And if not, we'll test it out on a reader. And if they can't understand something, maybe you could ask somebody to help you put some text in so that the reader can understand it. Always in the context of using this as a way to communicate. So we drew that top picture, just very simply. What is well, let's start with action. What would you like to do in your picture? If it's you, or if it's somebody else, where is it? What's the setting? Include a face to give us a clue for emotion, or to give us a clue of direction. Which way is the face looking? We talked a little about, looking to faces for cues and all that with these groups. And if you want, include some text to help refine the image a little bit. And then we unfolded the poster and we said, okay, on this bottom half, we're going to show the result of that action. What's going to come out of that? And especially, I like this one you're showing, the ski race one, because that student, I remember, really, this was in the winter time when we did this residency, and that student was really looking forward to the ski day that was coming up later that week. So she drew herself racing, and when we sort of revealed, like, and this is the next step, we're going to draw what happens because of that. And she lit up because she got to draw herself winning the race at the local ski area as part of the phys ed program she was in. And she, working as the artist with her direct support professional, she gets to make decisions. I encourage them to, if they wanted to be an animal, I said, I always draw myself as a bunny rabbit because I love bunny rabbits and they're cute and they look good on the page. Look at this. And I drew myself as my little bunny avatar. And I just encourage them to be creative. Draw yourself however you want. You can be a funny shape. You can be just a stick figure. You can be a monster or anything. And they got into that. Oh, that's me in Ryan's comic. Nice. So there's Ryan drawing. Ryan was he was a documentarian. He was going to draw what happened to him. So there he is drawing a picture. He's drawing on the drawing board. That's the picture he drew. And then what happens because of that? Because he's there in art class drawing, boom, there's Marek coming in with his scruffy beard and his hair. And this becomes Ryan's document of his experience of art class. And we could have gone on, and then what do Ryan and Marek do together? And we could be creating something together. And you can do this. We did this on large posters because of the students' needs for movement, and we had the space for it. But you can do this step by step. You could do this on sticky notes if you want to keep it small, or if it's easier to do large artwork, you can do it on big paper. And one way to go about it is, just it can be a little activity you do at every point in the day. You sit down and you work on a picture, and then the next day you pull that out and you say, what happens next? And you've kind of bridged yesterday and today by looking at yesterday's picture and drawing the next step. And then the next day, what happens next? And you can spread out that whole story. And it gives us, for those of us who make comics all the time, it gives you a sense of time passing. It gives you a sense of sometimes deadlines approaching, but it gives you a sense of accumulation of creative process too, rather than, I drew a picture, boom, move on to the next thing. You can come back to that picture and add another picture, and it helps us sort of put our attention on a topic and then follow it through another dimension, not just the visual, what does that picture look like, but what happened before it or after it.
Mm-hmm. So part of that with telling stories, how does that work so this, you're talking about really the basics of, as you say, like the storytelling aspects of it before and after.
Yeah.
And what would be like for some direct support professionals to utilize that as, so what you're talking about is a 2-panel comic then, correct?
These are, yeah, they can be longer. Some of the students then went on, next class, they would pull out another poster and do 3 and 4. Right. And they did longer ones. Yes.
And where do you see, compared to, we see a lot these days with people making videos for advocacy work through video, advocacy work through writing. How would you compare comics to other forms of art for advocacy's sake?
I think comics give us a different sense of access and intimacy and contact, right? When you see me and you see, my webcam on my face, you get to know what I look like and how I move. And you can tell if I lean in close and talk to you, or if I stand back, you get all those cues. When you see my cartoon characters, you get a very different sense of who I am. And you're not seeing me move at all, but you're seeing how I moved the pen across the paper and the little decisions I made. If I draw myself as a bunny rabbit, is it really detailed? Is it a stick figure? All these little things. Those are little clues of who I am, how I fit into the story, the decisions I made. That's what you're seeing with that student artwork too. You're seeing them, as we all are as artists, whether you're a professional cartoonist or painter or visual artist of any sort, or somebody who just draws a little smiley face at the end of a note, right? We all are wrestling with the limitations of our materials, the limitations of our bodies, the limitations of time, and trying to use all that in some way to create something that wasn't there before. So what you're seeing in that student artwork is they're all encountering identical blank posters and then moving in some different way and working in some different way with an adult who's helping them, or working side by side and giving each other feedback and changing their artwork that way. After I came out of this saying, wow, this really underscores that the art we create is kind of a document of the connections between us. If you believe that comics are best made with everybody off in a corner drawing separately, sure, that's one way to create comics. If you believe they're best made with everybody around the table, even passing pages back and forth and drawing the next step of each other's comics, that's another way to create them. Those ones you're showing there are ones that the teacher and I drew based on student input. They would choose the action, they would choose the animal, they would choose the setting, and some of these turned into longer format comics that each time we get together, we'd make the next step of it. So I think that's where you can, for the model that I was working with here, I had done a number of coffee camps down in northern Nicaragua during the coffee harvest season, going to schools that were set up for that time because the families are all off harvesting coffee and the kids need someplace to go that's constructive, that keeps them learning and keeps them practicing literacy skills. So we'd come in and make comics and we'd say, like, where do you want to be in 10 years? What do you want to be doing? Let's use a comic to visualize that, right? And that was the model actually that I used here. Not so much with Splashy, the especially eager coffee cup. That was a mini comic that came out of the students' suggestions from, you saw up above the, somebody had spilled coffee that day. So we just made a 2-panel, there it is. Yeah, we just made a 2-panel poster about spilling coffee. And then that turned into an 8-panel mini comic over the course of the residency. And then they could share it and enjoy it. And that's a student mini comic that happened along with it. So what you're seeing, because I brought that model in, where do you want to be in this case, next week, or what's your aspiration for being able to take a journey somewhere? Or if you could do or see or say or create anything, what would it be? And they had the chance to kind of throw their imagination out into that blank page and see what happened, and then see what happened when people saw that and reacted to it, when their classmates read it back to them. And that to me is where the, like I started to say earlier, I think I got into making comics as like, I was literally a 5-year-old who wanted to make the next Star Wars movie, but I didn't have a camera and I didn't know Mark Hamilton's phone number. So I was just like, well, I could just make the next Star Wars movie here on my, in my little notebook or something. And that was my job. I just took that on and started drawing comics. And I think that's the power of this, giving people a little space and a little structure that they can then use to create any kind of comic. Oh, the hand, you're showing the hand. That was a couple of the teachers and direct support professionals in the classroom were just tracing their hands, kind of killing time. And then they started drawing little characters around it. And that turned into its own mini comic. And they were just laughing and having fun and then showing it to the students. And nobody, yeah, that's right. The giant hand goes around picking people up and dropping them into this mysterious volcano. Yeah. So it gives everybody, you can use it as a way to blow off steam. You can use it as a way to say, in my heart of hearts, here's what I aspire to in life. You could use it to be like, hey, let's create something together. Tell me what you think this looks like, and then I'll draw the next step based on what you say. It can be it's an art form that, because it's inherently, it can be so simple, it can be so responsive, and you can do it literally. Well, I don't recommend doing it on a napkin, but you can do it on some scrap paper or something and create something that might stick around for a while, that people might come to you and ask to read. That's what I find happens with these comics. Hey, show them that skiing comic you drew. People want to see more of them. What happens after she wins the race? I find it's habit forming for readers and for artists.
And a piece of it too, as you said, is like, and we talk about it within, we talk about within the anthology that Green Mountain Support Services put together. When people ask, and I'm sure all of you viewers are out there, and you say, I'm a direct support professional, people are like, what's that? And it's so hard to kind of get into it. That's one of the benefits of advocacy, is that you allow the reader to be put in your shoes, to or put into the character's shoes to understand it. And the difference between writing it out and drawing it out is, as Marek, you showed earlier, you can, even if it's a circle and dots, you can evoke emotion in certain things. You can do a lot of that stuff, and you're able to make a very accessible story, or say something in a way that's more accessible than it would be to say, hey, here's this 20-page or 5-page service plan on how to work with somebody, how to work with Joe or Jim or Sally or Ferdinand, whatever the name of the person is that you provide services with. Being able to create some level of advocacy about that, whether it be a direct support professional. But you also have an example, Merrick, of another one, the most costly journey, showing another way that advocacy in comics can work. Did you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I love what you were saying. I can put this book under my camera here if you want.
Sure.
This is actually the Spanish language version. We'll look at the English language version.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you're saying because people can write all about, say, the stories of migrant farm workers in the US who are trying to keep their families together and support their families and pursue farm work professionally in a country where they're not citizens. And you can write about that. And it's amazing to read these stories and to decipher this writing and figure out what it's talking about. But when artists get involved, when we create comics, those of us who do, and talk about isolation and loneliness, and use, like I was saying before, use panel after panel or page after page or image after image, whatever format you're using, to explore what that really means, this gives you a totally different feeling, an embodied feeling that this storyteller is having about the narrative they're constructing here, working with an artist. Totally different from putting it into words, right? So that's the best way to say it, I think, is to show it. So this project follows that. That's our guiding principle. The Open Door Clinic, Julia Grand-Doucette at the Open Door Clinic came up with this idea. I think she happened to hear a radio, a VPR, Vermont Public Radio, broadcast about comics being used to tell all different kinds of stories. And she just had this little cartoon light bulb go on by her head. And she said, oh, wait a minute. I'm working with all these undocumented migrant farm workers around the countryside in Vermont, many of whom don't speak English, many of whom are here, without any legal documentation. And a big factor of their health, of their physical health and mental health, is the loneliness, the stresses that they're encountering in their lives here. So she went to Andy Kalovis at the Vermont Folklife Center and Ray Samares, who's the other editor from UVM. And this guy, Marek Bennett, also got involved. And they started putting together, I got involved a little later, but they started putting together a group of artists. Tilly Walden there, who drew these pages here, was the first. And they started pairing artists with storytellers from the migrant community who would tell the story of how they came to be in Vermont, the work they do, something that was important to them. Maybe it was a way they've survived and gotten through tough stuff. Maybe it was just telling the story of what their life was like. And paired with an artist, they would work with that artist to realize some piece of that story in 8 to however many pages it took. They were supposed to be all, I think, 8 to 10 pages. Some are longer. And we have 15 or 16 artists here and 20 some storytellers. And you can see each story is drawn in a really different style by a different artist, told in a really different style by a different storyteller. And this is this to me was such an eye-opener for how comics could be used for advocacy, because it's the medium really suited the needs for everybody. The storytellers needed privacy and they needed to not be going in front of a camera or something to record their story. But they also needed the control that the project really emphasized. It's ethnography. So we want the final comic to reflect their intentions, their sense of the narrative, and to reflect their story authentically. So we told all the artists, here's Greg's. This is Greg's here. we told all the artists that the only way this will go in the book is if you approve it at the end. And we told all the artists and the storytellers, the only way this will go in the book is if the storyteller gives it a read through in Spanish. They were all originally done in Spanish, and this is the English translation. And if the storyteller says, yeah, that's my story, or yeah, that's how I want my story presented. So that was a big piece of it, having that relationship where the storyteller controls what the story is, and the artist is there to serve that vision, also to push that vision, to say, well, here are a couple things that are possible. What do you think works best on the page? And we went through multiple drafts with all these to make sure that they suited the storyteller's vision. And for me, it's not a matter of what I think about the lives of migrant farm workers. It's a matter of what I think about, my society and the politics of my society and my relationship to the food I eat and the people who live in my community. Sure. But to tell and draw the story of these migrant farm workers, it really underscored to me like how it's not my story, it's their story. But when we work together on it, it becomes our story in a way, or it becomes, I guess that's advocacy, right? That we have this shared experience of putting together something that in some way captures a bit of each other's lives, because I could not have drawn the comics I drew for this book without also being here in New England and having a sense of, the setting, and without having had traveled in Central America and having friends from communities much like where these migrant workers are coming from. That helped me kind of connect with the storytellers I worked with, I hope, and produce something that they could say, yeah, that can be my story in this book. It's just a tiny piece of the whole experience, but that's what I want to represent my story.
So Marek, you brought up some good points about that. It's like, as direct support professionals listening to this, I mean, I think that the main piece of it is that, the only stories we see or read, and this sounds simple in its sense, is like, but the only stories we see and read are the only ones that are written and created. So as direct support professionals, is you're working with people who need some levels of advocacy, or might need some assistance maybe in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And and the thing about writing comics is, in making comics, it is the most accessible form of art. You don't have to take a writing class to have to write everything out. You don't have to take an art class to do it. If you can, as you said earlier, if you can draw a circle and a line, you're an artist. If you're able to, tell a couple words or put something together, I mean, these are the first steps that you would need to be able to be at some level of advocacy. So, and as we showed us some examples that comics isn't just superheroes. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to tell. Anything that has a story to be heard. This gives you, as direct support professionals, the opportunity to tell a story in an engaging way that doesn't have to be in an email to your boss to say, hey, I need help with funding on this, or hey, we've been working straight out, we've been working 18 months straight through COVID. There's ways you can say that through an email to say, we need help on this, or talking to folks. But being able to put it in a form of a form of sequential pictures you're touching on a more heartfelt and real way of saying something than it can be in an email, or it can be in a voicemail, or it can be in sitting down in a meeting with other people. I mean, so thoughts on that? What advice would you give for direct support professionals that are watching this now, to say, and I guarantee everybody watching this does have a story to tell. everybody has a story.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it be about the work they're doing or be about, home, whatever that they're passionate about right now, what would be your advice? What would be like the first 2 or 3 steps that you would tell them? All right, after this, do 1, 2, 3. What are those 3 steps that you would tell them?
Just hearing you say that, I'm thinking one little step, that a little way to experiment, and we all do this already, so maybe
Right.
this is a good step to think about, is next time you write a note to somebody or send a note to somebody, try writing it by hand if it's possible. It's always, sometimes it's just easier to type up an email, sure, but we all use smileys or emoticons or emojis or whatever they call them. We decorate things. We decorate our verbal communication with visual communication. Try handwriting a little note and try drawing a little face next to it and a little smiley, circle dot dot face. See, maybe you send this, maybe you don't. Try changing the expression of the face and see how that changes the meaning of the written message, and play around with that a little bit. And see if that gives you, I find sometimes that gives me, even if I write a little message and then do a little doodle of a little face next to it with a little expression, smiling, frowning, angry, happy, sad, whatever, it kind of gives me a sense of, oh, that goes with the words. That's not what I think. I often find that I have to kind of put something down on the paper before I start to understand or understand my ideas about it. So try that. Write a little message to yourself and doodle a little face next to it and see how the emotional content of the face or the expression on the face, let's say, changes the meaning of the text. And that can be a really effective way. I mean, you try that, please wash your dishes. You put it up by the sink with an angry face or with a smiley face, and that totally changes the experience of reading that little note. So maybe that's something we can use, right? If you want to tell a quick story about what the past 18 months have been like, or what you need to do your job well, or what your students need, or you want to help your students tell a story about what would help them do this or that in the classroom or at home, or communicate a message to their housemates or their family. Maybe give them 2 or 3 little boxes and put faces in them, and what is the face doing in each one, and help them get a little caption. If the face just says a couple words, let it be a floating face with a couple words, and just, I find that can be a powerful practice of saying, okay, if I present this to somebody and they can see the change over time, they can see the progression, and read panel to panel, and maybe they smile at the end, or maybe they ask what's next, and that to me, I very seldom have people read an email and say, oh, what's your next email? But if you draw a comic and you share it with in my experience, I draw with a lot of classrooms, you share it with a classroom, 9 times out of 10, somebody in that classroom comes up and says, what's next? Or is this going to happen? Or is that going to happen? And that tells me that it's stimulating the imagination of the reader as much as the artist. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think it's really that simple. It doesn't have to be boxes, but boxes help some people. Give yourself a space to draw, or a couple boxes. Try a couple stick figure faces, put a couple words with them, and see if that is, well, it's definitely a different way to communicate from typing up a quick email memo, right? And if that's a possibility for your communication, if people type something up, a post or an email, and send it to me, often it takes me a little while to read it. If they handwrite something and take a picture and send it to me, I tend to read it. I see the image and I don't even know I'm reading. I'm like just reading the text bubble in the face or whatever it is. And we take that information in a little differently.
Right. That's a good point. Even starting to draw is like it's like telling the story. Like if you get something, if you're at work and your supervisor or somebody sends you an email or something like that, or about something, as you say, the handwritten word, instead of mailing something to them, as you say, writing something on a piece of paper, taking a picture of saying like what you're going to email them and sending it back. That's a fun way of communicating as well.
I'm remembering another project we did in that classroom we were looking into earlier. There was a group of students. I don't think it's in that post you were showing. There was a group of students who were not going to be able to do like fine motor art creation. So we actually had them do large landscapes with paint and crayons on really big paper. And so they could do sort of full body shapes and colors. And then half the time it was like, what does that look like to you? And they'd figure out what it was as they kind of played with the materials. And they also had made little wire figures, little pipe cleaner figures where they had like a face with little arms and legs, and they could design whatever it was. So that was a project they had done. And then we created comics by using that landscape. This is the pond, this is the ski area, this is my house or whatever. And they could move their little figure around the landscape and take a photograph. And whoever was helping them could, with a little piece of paper, write a little message. If the figure said something, they could take a photograph of each little rearrangement of the parts, and they didn't have to draw it all. And that's, more labor intensive to set up the different pieces. But it was really cool to see how I always draw my comics because it's easy enough for me right now to pick up a pen and doodle in my sketch pad. But for them, it really worked better to set up a character, set up an environment, and then use the tablet to take pictures of each step of their comic and tell the story that way. So there's all different ways to do this,
Can we, since we have your camera already set up for, like, do you want to go ahead and kind of do a sample of of like a 8-page mini, not drawing out all 8 pages, but just showing people how they can make a little booklet?
Oh yeah, I love that. This is such a lifesaver for the whole pandemic. I've been like making exclusively 1-sheet minis, and I never did it before. I learned how to make these little books when I was in Sharjah, United Arab Emirates, just a few months before the pandemic. And another artist was like, oh, hey, let's do these. And it was so fun to draw these with people. Let me grab okay. Are you ready?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So the format. So the format you were just showing is turning a single piece of paper into an 8-page little booklet that then you can do that kind of practice on. You can draw a little face and give it a word bubble, or just write something different or draw something different on each page and see what comes of it. So there's a video on my site that shows you how to do this. So I think I won't assume you're doing it with me. I'll just do it kind of quickly in front of you so you've seen it done. And then you can, maybe you can share that video on my site. There's 3 quick folds. We just fold the paper in half and in half and in half. Again, I do this much more slowly if we're actually doing it together in a workshop, and the video will show you how to do that. When you open it up, that 2 times 2 times 2 is going to give you 8 sections of the paper, right? And you could use these as your boxes and put a title and your name here, and then just draw the first step of the story and the next, and you'd have the whole story on a single sheet of paper all in front of you. And if you like to draw small, this is a fun way to do it, but not ideal for every artist. But the really cool thing that happens here is if I just make one little cut, I'm going to make a little cut right along the fold right there, and snip from that section to that section right through there. The easiest way to do that is, of course, is to double the paper over. Find some scissors, make that cut right in the center, 2 sections, right? And then let's see, I'm going to turn it around like this. And again, the video shows you how to do this slowly on my site. So then if we sort of open that up, those 8 sections can all become pages of a little book And I love these as little pocket-sized books. They fit in your pocket. You can carry around a blank book now. And this book has, let's just check. Where's my pencil? Let's just check. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages. And some of that student artwork that you saw earlier is actually these books. And each page is a different step of the story. So that's the whole book right there. The cool thing is if you want to share these with your classmates or family and really get your story out, you make a little book, you draw your 8 pages. Like I said, it can be as simple as, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? My day, little diary comic. Was it a good day or a bad day? Well, that'll give you a clue on the cover, right? What did I do this morning? Well, there's 2 pages, or you can use it as a big page. What's something we did this afternoon? Oh, I'm going to do drawing with you right now on this little Zoom call, on this StreamYard call, right? What's going to happen this evening? I don't know. I'll wait till later in the day and I'll draw that. And that's my 8-page book, right? And that, if I really want to share it and get the word out about what we did today, or get the word out, or I could use it for what we talked about right now, the 8 points that we decide came out of this little chat we're having, right? And this can be the little printable note that you can have afterwards. So then I could take this and photocopy it or print it and make as many copies as I want, fold them up and give them to my friends and family. And it becomes, look how different that is. Here we said if we drew all 8 steps of the story, you'd have them all in front of you. You would see them beginning to end as you read the page. Here you're going to get a reveal. You're going to get a surprise. So the format's changed. It's still comics. It's still one image after another, but we only see a couple pages or one step at a time. And then by the end, we've had all these surprises as we read through it. So it's a really different way of reading sequential visual narrative. And that, I think that's what you're going for, right? Like this is a very accessible format. Right. If you're into doing page by page, fine motor work, and keep it simple, don't make it too fancy. Just grab a marker or a pen and try doodling something on every page and see what story comes out of it.
Well, and when you fold it back open again, just for the viewers to recognize, is like, as you see, the numbers are upside down on the top. So when you do, not if, so DSPs, when you do this, remember, it's not like an 8 form like you'd find in the Sunday Funnies, where it's all,
right.
Keep in mind that. So
I actually draw them. Here's one that I drew with a friend. And this was a collaborative one we did. We have a little drawing game where you draw. I think I didn't start with the cover. I almost always do the cover last. I started with a picture. So I drew that. And then I asked my friend, what do you think happens next? And then, they told me what they think happens next. And then I drew the next page based on that. I could follow what they think is going to happen. I think they actually said, the dog will get a ladder. So, okay, that'll be the next step of my story. And we were going back and forth with different projects here. And from there, we just kept asking each other, what do you think happens next? And then the result would be a collaboration there, and opening the scope and just playing with, well, what logically or illogically might happen next. And by the end, hopefully we've discovered something that neither one of us would have thought of beforehand, right? So that's a nice way to collaborate. And then what you're saying is when you open that up, it's definitely not like half the book is upside down. You can't really read it this way because it's meant to be read as a book and revealed. I didn't want to have the ending visible as you're looking at it, right? As you're starting to read the story. I wanted it to be a surprise, to unfold and be a journey and document a journey we did together in this case.
Oh, that's great.
So that's what it looks like.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Marek. So what's that call to action? What would you tell the direct support professionals what they need to do now after spending time with us this afternoon?
Don't take my word for it. Try it yourself. And if it's possible, I like to say, if it's at all possible, try making comics with kids. They will teach you so much about it. And they will really appreciate, they'll really appreciate your willingness to maybe not be an expert, but just try something. And a lot of people say I can't draw because they just haven't drawn in a long time, or they just haven't let themselves draw in a long time. And there are things where I say, oh yeah, I have a hard time drawing that. Well, I haven't practiced. I haven't drawn it in a long time. So just relax, let it be imperfect, as we all are, and focus on putting down some marks that connect you with other people, that communicate something, or that surprise you in some way. That's my call to action. It's that simple.
That's great, Marek. And I would say, is what you said is like maybe doing this little 8-page thing, or doing like your before and after thing is like, then, after this, if you spend time, go see your nieces or nephews or your grandkids or your kids, or the people that you work, or the people that you work with, say, hey, let's make a shopping list. Instead of making a list, let's make a little booklet of everything that we need to go shopping for. Or, hey, what's the plan we're going to be doing next week? Making it as a book, and then utilizing that book to say, all right, we said we're first going to the beach, then we're going to go here. Like, you utilizing that, anything that you're doing with a checklist, or anything that you're doing with working on any specific goals and stuff like that, turn it into a book. Turning it into a comic is a great way to start doing that part for advocacy. And then you'll have a library. And you, Marek, I gotta say, because I follow your work, you actually took a great idea that I think could work for direct support professionals as well. Those that might be having any residential settings. You took a tea box.
Oh, right.
And added those little booklets in there. So the found objects of the tea box. Do you have an example of that you could share with us?
Sure. We're having some issues with these, with the humidity. I have to change the masking tape I'm using. But yeah, these are tea boxes we just masking taped around, and some we turned into libraries that you could open up. I have the videos, the how-to videos on my site. Oh, I never finished the shingles on that library. And they open up, and then we made all these little books to go inside them just by folding index cards. Here's a blank one. This one doesn't have a lot of them in it. And they're ready to be filled. And then it becomes a little bookshelf, right? You can stuff the books in there, fill it up with books over time. And it becomes a little bookshelf and a little document, or it could become a little book-eating monster. Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it's like, then I have these up on my shelf here, and I walk by them every day, and the little monster's looking at me, or the library, or some of the others I gave away to family and friends. And I know inside them are these little books I made with family members, or, little books I made while thinking of other people. And they just become a nice little document.
Yeah. And it's a great opportunity for direct support professionals to say, we learn in person-centered thinking, your one-page profile, making a little comic book of what's important to you, what people admire about you. These are the things you can actually make into these little comic books. And then when you're working with people that maybe with folks that you started working with, saying, here's a little comic book I made about myself, about some of the things that I like, some things that interest me. And maybe doing that with the people that you support as well. So comic books are the most, as I said earlier, the most accessible way to tell a story, and the easiest way for somebody to tell a story. And so thank you very much, Marek. We're at the hour point, but so if people want to learn more about and want to maybe follow you or message you, they can go to marekbennett.com, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, it should be right there on the screen.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different projects and things coming up on my site. I was just telling you, we have the new Daisy Turner book just coming out yesterday. I just got news that it's out and available. And I'm doing a lot of historical comics and public health comics. So yeah, go check it out and drop me a line. I'd love to hear from people who are using comics, and I'd love to see what you're drawing too.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Marek. And for the rest of your direct support professionals, enjoy the rest of the conference and start drawing.